And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather showing front moving northward and eastward with a new low developing on it that'll move into the northern Cook Inlet, western northern Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley. After midnight tonight, that's going to bring a good shot of wind and precipitation in across southern Alaska here in the North Gulf Coast into the Copper River Basin, where there's a winter storm warning out for heavy snow and a winter weather advisory out for the Susitna Valley for moderate snow. And some of that moisture will work in along that warm front into the northern panhandle, but it'll stay dry down to the south. Gusty winds, snow showers covering all of the Bering Sea, Aleutians into the southwest interior there with lighter wind conditions behind the front later tonight. And then for tomorrow, another trough keeps it snowy and breezy here along the southwest coast with light snow all the way up to the Seward Peninsula and the western Arctic coast. This system tracks off to the northeast and weakens, much like the one today, although holding together better down here. That'll bring some gusty winds and rain into the panhandle. Snow showers diminishing in the afternoon, south central Alaska, clearing in the Kuskokwim Valley. Less wind, but still a lot of snow showers out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And then on Friday, much less wind out here with a lot less in the way of snow showers. Mostly back to the west here, but maybe some clearing for the eastern Aleutians on up to the Pribilofs and Nunivak Island. Areas of light snow over the western interior, dry and a little cooler. South central Alaska, Copper River Basin on up into the Tanana Valley. Some lingering light snow up in the northeast, but dry for the North Slope and Arctic coast. Showery for the panhandle. And this system will bring some rain into Kodiak Island, just skirting the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Range there, and it'll increase the chances for some light precipitation for the southern Kenai Peninsula into the North Gulf Coast. Coastal water forecast, south coast of the Panhandle for tomorrow, south to southwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Southwest to southeast winds on the central coast 20 to 25 knots. And then southeast winds 25 to 40 knots for the north coast. Lynn Canal, southeast winds 25 knots. Central southern interchannel, southeast 15 to 20 with 3 to 5 foot seas. And then for the day on Friday, south coast, you're looking at westerly winds 20 to 25 knots, and the north coast still out of the east at 20 to 25 knots. Central northern interchannel, south winds at 20 knots. Clarence Strait, southeast at 20 with 6 foot seas. North Gulf Coast tomorrow, southwest winds 30 to 35 knots. Prince William Sound, small craft advisories, south winds 25 knots with 6 foot seas. Southwest winds 20 to 25 knots here for Cook Inlet with seas up to 6 feet. And west winds 25 knots for Kamishak Bay, back to southwest at 25 for the Barren Islands. Those pick up to 40 knots out of the southwest for the Barren Islands on Friday, with gale warnings for west winds at 35 knots in Kamishak Bay. Southern Cook Inlet, small craft advisories, west at 25. Northern Cook Inlet, northwest at 15 knots. East winds 15 knots for Prince William Sound. Those seas back down to 3 feet. And for the western North Gulf Coast here, southwest winds 35 knots. South to southeast 20 to 25 knot winds off to the east. Kodiak Island for Thursday, southwest winds 25 knots. Otherwise, gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula for the day Thursday, southwesterlies 35 to 40 knots. Seas up to 21 feet here, and southwest 30 knots for Bristol Bay. Kodiak Island on Friday, west-southwest winds 30 to 35 knots. West winds, or west-southwest winds, 25 knots Alaska Peninsula, and southwest 25 for Bristol Bay with seas at about 8 feet. And for the eastern Aleutians, central and eastern Aleutians tomorrow, southwest winds 40 to 45 knots there, with seas anywhere from 20 to 30 feet. Back to the west, west winds 35 knots. And then for Friday, southwest winds 30 knots here for Adak and Atka, all the way back out to Shimei and Attu. And the eastern Aleutians, west winds 25 to 30 knots, with seas anywhere from 10 to 12 feet. And for the southwest coast for Thursday, winds will be southeast or south-southeast 20 to 30 knots here, strongest south of Nunivak Island. Gale warning westerlies up to 35 knots for the Pribilofs, with those seas at 26 feet. Southeast 25 knots for St. Matthew Island, and for the St. Lawrence Island area, Norton Sound, winds will be southeast at 15. Even lighter winds for those areas on Friday, east at 10 for Norton Sound, southeast 10 for St. Lawrence Island. Winds southwest coast here coming down, southwest 15 to 20 knots. Still low brisk there for the Pribilofs, westerlies at 30 knots, and 25 knot winds for St. Matthew Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, east to northeast winds, 25 knots. Northeast winds 30 knots here for the central and western Arctic coast and the Chukchi Sea. Looking at east to southeast winds at only 10 to 15 knots. And then for the day on Friday, western Arctic coast, brisk wind advisories continue, northeast winds 30 knots, but the Chukchi Sea staying lighter, northeast 10 to 15. Central coast northeast at 20 knots, and eastern Beaufort Sea coast looking at northeast winds at 15 knots.